Hey everyone, welcome to season 3, episode 11 of Seeking Witchcraft. I'm your host, Ashley, and today I'm going to be talking about a sometimes uncomfortable topic, which is the skyclad practice, just as a general topic. But to help me talk about this, I have a repeat guest, Kim, which you may recognize from the Baby Witch episode. So thank you so much, Kim, for coming back on. You want to introduce yourself to people who may not have listened to that episode?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So my name's Kim Gardner. I started down the Gardnerian path back in 2004. So I've been doing this for about 16, 17 years. Started a coven in 2012, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming back, Kim. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing about your expertise in this topic and your experiences. And yeah, it's going to be a pretty interesting episode. So, for those who don't know, people are probably wondering what is skyclad if you've never heard that word before. Skyclad is also known as ritual nudity. Yay. So, think of the stereotypical witches dancing naked around the fire, like a bonfire in the wood. That's skyclad. They're skyclad. So why are we bringing this up with witchcraft? Well, it is actually not an uncommon thing. It's pretty common, I would say, within different traditions of witchcraft. So Gardnerians practice skyclad, Alexandrians do as well. I don't know off the top of my head any other traditions. Kim, I don't know if you do, but I know either way, Gardnerian and Alexandrian are the biggest branches.
Yeah.
So we're definitely going to have the most skyclad practicing members there.
Yep. No, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's common. You can also do it in your own eclectic practice. It doesn't have to be a traditional thing. There are definitely covens out there that do not practice skyclad. A lot of those covens that you find will be more on the eclectic side of things, meaning that they might not have a specific tradition that they refer back to, or even if they do, they might just still be a little bit more eclectic and have their own way of practicing. But you might be wondering, okay, so this is my first time hearing of skyclad. It's ritual nudity. Why are people doing this? So, Kim, why do you think people go skyclad? Like, what's your perspective on this?
So personally, I hear a lot of people say that, it's to prevent the restriction of the flow of the energy and things of that nature. I've never really subscribed to that because anybody who's ever done any type of real in-depth energy work, they know that it can move through clothing pretty easily. But for me personally, it's all about freedom. It's all about being free in our rights, being free in our practice, and coming to ritual as equals, and being really raw and vulnerable and just present in the moment.
Yeah, that's a great way to pretty much taking the words right out of my mouth. Skycloud practice is definitely a freeing experience. It can also help you get into a ritual mindset because you know, most people in their normal everyday life are not walking around completely naked, just around a ton of other people. When you're doing it in a witchcraft context, you're kind of triggering that, like, oh, something's going on, like that little switch inside your mind. And it takes yourself out of that mundane into knowing, like, something's up, something's different. I know on a previous episode that I had with Patrick asking questions for an elder in Wiccan tradition, he actually had a really funny thing he said that goes along with what Kim was talking about, where he was saying, some people say it restricts the flow of energy, but like, magic can transcend time and space, but it can't go through your cotton t shirt, really. And I was like, you know what?
Yeah.
That's honestly so true. Um, on a completely non kind of witchy sense, when you're in ritual, it gets really hot. So a lot of people who are involved in traditions or eclectic groups or even just their own personal practice may have a special ritual garment that they wear, maybe a robe or something, and that's completely fine. You don't have to go skyclad if this is not something that you're comfortable with, because not every tradition might work for you. Anyway, you may have a specific robe or something that you wear. I don't know about you, but in my outer court, we did not practice skyclad, which is something I'll talk about a little bit later. But we didn't practice skyclad, but we did have a specific outfit or robe that we wore in ritual. And it got so hot. I almost caught myself on fire so many times because I got one of those fancy looking robes that has like the really long sleeves, and let me tell you, that was not a good idea to do. So in a practical sense, working skyclad is not only freeing, but it cools things down a little bit because it gets hot in ritual. Like it gets very, very warm when you're working with energy and raising it like that. So sometimes it's just nice to cool down a little bit and not catch yourself on fire. The only thing you might need to worry about catching on fire is your hair.
Yeah, that is so true. And also the robes can be a bit restricting. If you really get into ecstatic dance and a lot of movement, robes can be really restricting in that sense. And having the freedom of movement, I think, is a wonderful thing with going skyclad as well. You don't have that limitation and those restrictions of your clothing, and you can just dance and be free. It's wonderful.
Yeah, and that actually brings up a really good point. And as I remember when I was in my outer court, I was so nervous about something accidentally slipping, like with my robe, or it becoming undone, especially for like moving a little quicker than we normally would, like a little bit faster than a walking pace. And you know, I'll tell about my experiences with the whole skyclad thing because I definitely had my opinions on it pre initiation into my current tradition. But when I was in outer court, I was so preoccupied during circle where I would just like constantly be making sure like my robe was tied up and like everything was in place. And if we were walking around, like making sure it wasn't going to come undone or making sure I wasn't going to step on anything in front of me. And, that can kind of take you out of the moment a little bit. And, when you're working skycloud, you don't have to worry about that, things like that, because there's not anything that you're going to be fixing. There's nothing there. But yeah, so I think this sounds all fine and dandy and great, but I'm sure people listening, especially those who've never done this before, may have a list of concerns about why they might not want to do this. And Kim and I are gonna kind of talk about some of those and address some of them. So you ready?
I am ready.
All right. So I think the biggest concern is insecurity, body insecurity, feeling self conscious for a variety of reasons. People can
Mhm.
feel self conscious because maybe they have some medical surgeries or scars or things that they have done with their body or have had done to their body that they don't want others to see. I've also heard of people, for example, posting online or just in general of seekers who might be trans, who may not be fully comfortable with their body in the current state that it's in, or they might not want to necessarily say that they're trans yet. And they might worry that by going skyclad, they might expose something before they're really able or willing or ready to explain, or not even explain, but willing or ready to talk about their past if they so choose. And this can include pre and post op trans seekers as well. There's also some natural body responses that people have that they might worry about, such as, women on their periods, bladder incontinence, which we can adjust this in a moment. Or if you're a dude, you might be worried you might get a boner in circle. You know what? It happens. Most people are afraid of natural body responses that they cannot control. It happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all of those things are totally normal. I think regardless of how long we've been doing it or what your background looks like, everybody has some level of concern around being naked in front of other people. Body insecurities, in my opinion, is one of the biggest, as you mentioned. And we all go through a level of that. When I first started out, my body insecurities were a huge thing for me. And I had to really work past that and work past those insecurities. Not that they go away. I mean, I've lost 100 pounds since I've been initiated, and my body insecurities are still there. They just get refocused to different things. And so, really learning how to work past that, I think, is part of the work that we even need to do when bettering ourselves and becoming better witches and better priestesses and priests in the craft.
Yeah, absolutely. And with things such as natural body responses, like periods, for example, I hear this question a lot of people asking, well, like, what happens when you have your period if you're skyclad? Listen, like, skyclad practice might be part of a tradition, but we're also human too. And we recognize that sometimes in circle, you might need to wear some underwear, or, you might want to wear a wrap around yourself or a pair of shorts or something. Like, skyclad practice is great, but if you're getting pressured into being skyclad, if you have a natural body response that you don't want going all over the place, then that might be a red flag right there if they're forcing you to do that. That being said, skyclad practice, if it's part of a tradition, you will be expected to be skyclad. But again, if you have bladder incontinence, for example, there are definitely older people in the tradition, and there's, younger people as well that might suffer from this as well. You're not going to be made fun of. You're not going to be looked differently, and you're not going to be forced to not wear what you need to wear to make yourself okay in that situation.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the big things too is, once you do it and you're actually experiencing this on a more regular basis, and I know this might sound weird, but you forget that you're skyclad. You forget that you're naked. You just get so involved in the ritual and sharing a space with your coven or with people in your community that that is one of the last things that you think about. And even during my initiation, I literally was sitting around after the initiation had taken place and was just like, oh my gosh, we're naked. And, I had totally just forgotten about it and just got so wrapped up in the experience of the moment that, it wasn't even a thought.
Yeah, that is completely true. Completely my experience too, where I was so incredibly nervous for the whole situation. But honestly, when you're in that situation, when you're in that circle space and you get things going and you're kind of getting into the flow of everything, you honestly forget that you were naked. And, I'm not saying this happens immediately. Sometimes it could take a couple minutes. Sometimes it is immediate. Sometimes it takes 10 minutes, what have you. When you are in that situation, you forget. And when, you have a couple moments here and there that you might remember, like, oh my gosh, we're all naked, then you're kind of like, oh, we're all naked, whatever. And you just kind of get back to whatever you're doing because you're in that ritual mindset and you're focused on something. And it's really not a big deal in the moment. And I know that sounds so crazy. And if my pre initiation self heard me saying this, I'd be like, no way, I'm on I don't know. I'm crazy. Like I probably haven't slept in a week and that's why I'm saying this, but it's true. Um uh yeah, it's you really honestly forget. I know another concern that people have as well with Skyclad is that there is a stigma associated with nudity, but there's nothing wrong with nudity. There's nothing wrong with it. We're all born naked. It's how we come into the earth. That being said, like, I'm fine with skyclad practice, but I don't just hang around my house naked with my friends outside of a witchcraft context. I'm not really doing that on a normal everyday basis. For me, a skyclad is strictly reserved for my tradition and for the things that we do in circle, nothing else. But, there is still the stigma with nudity. If people want to be naked around me, I don't really care. It is what it is. I've seen naked people before, whatever. But
Yeah.
sometimes people can have trouble getting past that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think one of the big things is it's really against societal norms, how most of us were raised, especially if we were brought up, as I was, in a Southern Baptist or a Christian, with a Christian upbringing. We were really taught to hide ourselves and sometimes to be ashamed of our bodies, especially as women. We are taught that. And nudity is overly sexualized. It is used as a product, as a marketing ploy. It is used in so many different ways, and we need to learn how to just be free and to respect our bodies instead of always having to have them sexualized. And I think that's one of the big things that a lot of people need to try to work past, is to be able to see themselves, as they are and as an individual, and not always I mean, we are sexual beings, but not always looking at ourselves naked and immediately going to that sexual. Oh gosh, I'm trying to think of the word to use, but to sexualize it, and just to learn how to be comfortable in our own skin without going to that place.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the terms of sexuality, there are some other concerns people might have where if they're in a relationship as well, they might not
Mm-hmm.
think that their partner would be okay with it. This is where an open line of communication definitely comes in. Um, yeah, so that's definitely a valid concern. I would say if you are interested in practicing skyclad with other people, I think that that is something you should bring up with your partner. At the end of the day, it is absolutely your choice and you should do what makes you happy. But I think it's important to discuss with your partner that, hey, I'm involved in this, and we're doing skyclad practice just to make sure that you're not hiding, because unfortunately, as Kim said, sometimes people do see nudity as a sexual thing. And let me tell you right now, skyclad practice is not a sexual thing. It really is not. But yeah, that can also be another concern as well. So if you do have a partner and if you're unsure about that, I would make sure you communicate with them. Let them know what's up. Don't hide that from them if that is something that you're interested in doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually a topic that came up when I was starting down this path, having a discussion with my husband, and kind of explaining what I wanted to do, what that I'd found a coven that I was really interested in studying with, and he, jokingly said, "Well, as long as you're not dancing naked under the full moon, I'm totally fine, and I
Oh
will support."
no.
Yeah, and I was just like, well, there's this one thing we need to talk about. And so, I was just open and honest with him. And he was a little uncomfortable with it. But at the end of the day, he trusted me. Our relationship was solid. And, it's all about trust. If you have that trust with your partner, hopefully it won't be an issue for you. But again, as you said, open and honest communication is always the best thing, and hopefully they end up being supportive.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, moving on to another topic with Skycloud is I know that sometimes, okay, being Skycloud can open up a lot of insecurities for people and open up a lot of um, past things that may have happened to them. And there may be somebody listening to this show that says, I'd like to do this, but I have experienced something in my past that I don't think I can get over this. So, Kim has so bravely offered to discuss her experience with something related to this. If you'd like to speak about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first off, I just want to say anybody who has an abusive past, whether it be physical, mental, or sexual, I feel that, and I can relate to that on a very deep level. Myself personally, I'm somebody who doesn't like to let fear control me. So typically, if I'm afraid of something, I seek out ways to challenge myself to push past it. Um, Not that I get over my fear. I just don't let the fear control me. And so my body insecurities and, things of that nature were always an issue for me. But I pushed past it because initiation into the Gardnerian tradition was something I really wanted, and especially within the coven in which I was being trained in. Um, my husband was very supportive, and he is an amazing partner. I can't say enough wonderful things about him. And getting to that point, working over a year with this group, and just feeling really passionate about wanting to do this. I do have a background of physical, sexual, and mental abuse, and so I had thought I'd gotten past all that. We do the work, we go to therapy, we address these issues. And it had been 20 years since this issue had happened. And when my HP and HPS sat me down and said, "Hey, we think you're ready. We want to schedule the date." I broke down. I just started crying. I didn't know why. I was just absolutely consumed by fear, and I couldn't put my finger on it because, again, I had been out of this relationship for 20 years, and I thought I had worked past everything. Unexpectedly, triggers do sneak up on us on occasion, and things bring stuff up for us. But in that moment, I didn't know what was going on. So my HP and my HPS said just to, take some time. They were super supportive, and just asked me to sit with it and let them know, what I wanted to do. And so I did, and I, went home. I took some time. I talked to my husband. I talked to friends about it. I did a lot of meditation. I just really sat with it. I dug really deep. People, you hear the word shadow work a lot, where we have to kind of dig into to aspects of our life where we may not want to always face. So I just did a lot of work, and I discovered that this past that I had, with this abusive partner, was really bringing up a lot of issues, and it was the topic of skyclad that of being skyclad and having to go through the initiation rite that really brought this trigger up for me. And what I realized is that the idea of being fully exposed, being completely raw and vulnerable in front of people, it just terrified me. And so I really just sat with it. Like I said, I did a lot of work. And finally, I don't know where this voice came from, but I was just like, he's not going to beat me again. I am not going to allow him to continue to take my power away. And so I made the decision that I was going to stand up and say, yeah, no more. You're not going to do this to me anymore. And so that night, I called my initiating HPS, and we scheduled the night. And when I got to the Covenstead, I was incredibly excited, but I was also incredibly nervous and scared and terrified, and just about any emotion you can think of feeling, I was feeling. And when it got down to it, and they went down to the temple space, and they had asked me to just, kind of wait for them to come and get me. Um, I just got more nervous and more scared. And I had my keys in my hand. I'm like, I could leave right now. I can run away and not do
Oh
this.
my gosh.
But I didn't. I stuck through it. And when they came to get me, again, my heart was racing. I wanted to run, but I really pushed myself past it. And when I was led into the temple room, I got to tell you, the visual of that moment, the sounds, the smell of the incense, the energy levels that were already there, it was palpable. And this feeling of calm came over me. And it was such a huge relief. I just remember sitting there and thinking that I finally found that protective family. I found that home in that space where I knew that I was safe. And I can't even describe the level of healing that happened in that moment. And, to this day, it is the most healing experience that I've ever had. After going through therapy, after everything that I've done, that moment was the most healing moment of my life. And it was incredibly powerful. I felt like I regained my sense of self, and I regained my personal power in that particular moment. And for those of you that have that type of background, you know what it's like to have your power stripped from you. And that is, it's a hard place to be, and it's a hard thing to work through. And having that moment to where you just feel like, I did it. I reclaimed who I am. That's a pretty monumental moment.
Wow, I'm just sitting here listening to this story because this is my first time hearing it as well. Kim had reached out and told me that she had a background in this sort of topic, and she wanted to speak about it. And so, that was wow. That's just such a powerful, moving story with such a great ending. And wow, yeah, I'm kind of shocked, or not shocked, but I'm kind of just speechless. That's wonderful. um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really tough to go into things like this when you feel like your power is taken from you. But I think your story could be a good reminder for, as you mentioned, those with who may have had a similar background to you, that you know there's a way to heal, and people might be able to find that by reclaiming their power. And maybe Skycloud is a way they could do that. It might not be, um, but it's so wonderful that that was such a healing experience for you. That's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. It is an incredible moment. I mean, you can just still feel those emotions as you're talking about it, kind of coming up, and it's something that'll never leave me. And I wish I could share that experience with everybody who's ever been through a past like that, who's been through trauma in their background. I wish I could give everybody that moment.
Especially too, with everything, that first moment of when you're truly skyclad with a group of people is definitely a moment that you don't forget. Even if you're not nervous for it, it sticks with you. So my story is my story with Skyclad was a little bit different. I joined my training group. Honestly, didn't know too much about Wicca or witchcraft at all, whatsoever, to be completely honest. And I came into my training group saying to myself, well, I know they practice Skyclad. That's definitely not for me, but the people here are really cool. I like them. And worst comes to worst, I could just get a cool education of like Wicca 101, Witchcraft 101, and just leave with that and build upon my own solitary eclectic practice. And I would have been totally fine with that. Well, as the time went on in my training group, I realized that, man, I really like these people. And oh no, like the training group is coming to an end and I'm never going to see them again. And not only that, but wow, I'm really loving everything that we're learning. Like things are just amazing. This is such a magical experience. I don't want this to end. And I was a complete wreck and a whole mess about the whole skyclad thing. You can ask anybody in my coven, anybody I was in outer court with. I did not hide that from them at all. They knew up front from day one that I was not okay with it by any stretch of the imagination. I was not okay with it. I used to say to my training HP and my HBS, hey, I'm probably not going to ask for initiation, but it's cool to be here. Or like, if I did talk about initiation, I would say, so if I ask, maybe if I ask. I mean, I was very, very adamant that I was like, it's not a guarantee for them. So, as I got closer towards the end of my training group, I remember I went and I visited another witch and I was kind of explaining the situation to them. And I remember we were just drunk in an Uber. Like in the middle of a city I'd never been in before. And he just looks me straight in the face after I'm over here complaining to him about how I'm scared to be skyclad. And, I really want to do it, but like I'm terrified. And he just looks at me and he says, the desire to work with the people that you're with right now should overcome your fear of being skyclad. And that just stuck with me, and to this day, I still think of that moment because that was such an influential thing for me. He also said some other great things about how, if I felt a calling to the gods, I should probably keep going with that if I felt compelled to, and I did. But in that moment for me, the sky cloud was such a big cloud over me that like that's really like the biggest focus that I had in that moment. So, he was completely right. And I remember I took that home, wrote that quote down in my journal, and I really sat with it for a really, really long time, like a couple months. And I remember meditating and thinking about it. And then, I don't know, like, right. At one point, I said to myself, I'm so anxious about the idea of getting sky or being skyclad with everybody, but I haven't even asked for initiation. And I said, I'm a very type A personality. I can't work up to something unless I have a date in mind. If I have a date in mind, I can work to that. But my thoughts are everywhere because I don't know when and if this will happen. So I asked for initiation, was told a date a little bit later. Um, and I was like, okay, I can work with this. So I had my date. And right when it was about to happen, the day of, I remember waking up that day and like I just felt different. I was like, you know what? I'm nervous, but I'm just not gonna think about it. Like, the thought was definitely in the back of my head, but I was kind of just like, "No, no, no, I'm just really excited for the initiation and everything that comes along with it." Like, I'm just not gonna think about the skyclad thing right now. Just kind of push it away before I can really put any energy into it. So when the time came when I was at the Covenstead and it was time for me to go down to, go through the initiation, I remember somebody walked into the room I was in and I was wearing like a robe at the time. And I was like, you know what? I'm just not going to think about it. And she walks in, she started talking to me and I just threw it off. And I'm like, all right, let's go. Like, and I remember in that moment being like, oh my God, I just did that. And I was like, well, she's seen it now. Like can't change anything. Like it is what it is. I guess I'll just go down like this now. And yeah, and in the time of the initiation itself, like the first time I saw everybody there skyclad, that was definitely an experience. I was fantastic with eye contact the whole time. But that's honestly just some circle etiquette as well. But yeah, and you know what? It was really an awesome experience. And it sounds crazy, but in the initiation, as nervous as I'd been for over a year, in that moment, I forgot about it. There was times in the initiation where I was just so like concerned about everything else that was happening that I was like, "Oh, I totally forgot I'm not wearing any clothes right now." It's crazy how natural it can feel when you're in that situation. Um, I will say that looking back now, I can't believe I was that nervous about it. Holy shit, I needed to calm down. Somebody should have slapped me. Because only saying that because I know my own self now. I probably could have had somebody give me a little bit more insight into this to make me calm down a little bit because I was just frantic. But I will say that initiating into my tradition has been the best thing I've ever done. And I can't believe I spent so much time and energy being so nervous about something that honestly came so naturally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny. A drunken Uber ride gave you some really great advice. So
Yep.
yeah, whoever it was that shared that advice with you, I hope they're listening because kudos to you. That was really great advice.
Oh, yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, so it's great, great drunken Uber advice, but you know what? Sometimes you just need that pep talk when you're had a couple drinks and you're in an Uber. That's like the best place next to the girls' bathroom. Like that's where you're gonna get all life secrets and all the wisdom that you need, right? So it worked
Yeah,
out for me. It was
absolutely.
great. All right. Yeah, so I talked a little bit about circle etiquette. So if anybody's interested in skyclad practice, just know that yes, while everybody is naked, there is circle etiquette that comes along with that. First of all, don't stare people down into their soul when they're naked. That could be a little alarming even if you're wearing clothing. Please just don't stare at people. That gets a little uncomfortable. Um the second thing is if you're a guy, please don't touch your little dangling bits down there in the middle of a circle with everybody around you. And you know what? Same for if you're a woman, just I would say just keep your hands away from specific areas when there's people around you, especially if there's a chance that you're going to be holding hands with them. Nobody wants to hold your hand if you're, touching areas that people are not going to reach over and touch themselves. Um, and also just don't do any of what I just said at the same time. Don't stare at people and touch your little, your areas. It's just not a cool thing to do. Don't do it.
Yeah. What
um,
I was gonna say, one of the things to be aware of too is, sometimes nerves, we tend to joke around a little bit, and like nervous joking about people being naked sometimes can be unwelcome. So I would be mindful of that as well until you get to know the group really well, and you know everybody's comfort level around that.
oh yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. Another thing about skyclad practice is that you know, generally there will be a hygiene element to this. So, for the most part, the people that you're working with will probably ask you to not come straight from the gym and then immediately go into skyclad practice. And they're going to expect that from you, and you should probably expect that from them as well. So that's definitely a thing. And let's see. So, if you're interested in building up to skyclad practice, here's a couple ways you could do that. So, the first thing I would recommend is if you've never done this before, start small. Start with a robe, or honestly, just start with like a specific ritual jewelry item or something that you can wear that takes you away from the mundane. Kim, I'm not sure if you guys practice with robes when you started in your outer court.
We absolutely did. We did not practice skyclad in our court.
So I've heard of covens that their outer court does practice skyclad. It's not necessarily a common thing, but I have heard of it before. Um, it does happen. I would say maybe be a little wary if it's a initiatory tradition. Maybe vet them out first. You could do that by, if it's Gardnerian or Alexandrian, messaging any of the admins on the page to verify the identity of the people that you're with, just to make sure that they're legitimate. I will also say in my own experience, I have seen people talking about how they wouldn't let seekers in immediately if they're not comfortable with Skyclad from the start. You know, there's something called coven autonomy, and that covens run however they want, and that extends to their outer courts as well. Well, they run however they want within the realms of the tradition and still following the general guidelines. And I've seen a couple people actually say that they wouldn't let somebody in their outer court in if they did not like the idea of Skyclad right off the bat. And it's funny because when I look at that, I'm like, wow, well, if you were the only coven around, I wouldn't have been in your outer court. I would have never been initiated. I would have never started this podcast. I would have never had or met any of the people that I know now. And so, if that's the case and you do meet a group that says that, I would say, if you're not comfortable with Skyclad, maybe look for another group that is a little bit more flexible. Um, and I guess to any people who may be listening to this who run covens as well, just a heads up, I would have not been initiated if I had those rules set on me. I eventually came around and was completely fine with it, but it took me a long time to get there. It was not an instant process for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I wouldn't have been initiated either if it would have been a practice from the very beginning. It takes a lot of time as you're getting to know people, and getting to know, making sure that you just gel with them, have that connection to where you want to get closer. You want to show that vulnerability. it would be hard for me to just meet new people and immediately take my clothes off. That would be a little bit uncomfortable. And I would have a hard time setting that expectation for any seekers in our coven, too. Again, coven autonomy, everybody sets, the practice that they feel is appropriate for their coven. Um, and that's an important thing about the Gardnerian tradition. So, if I fully respect that, I just know that I probably would not have made it through.
Yeah, definitely. And, you bring up a good point. And, ultimately, it's easy to say absolutely no to the idea of skyclad or doing this with other people if you haven't met them yet, or if you don't really truly know them. And, that was essentially my experience with my group. It was very easy for me to say absolutely not, probably not, no way when I first started out in the group. But after I got to really know them and they put their walls down and I started putting my walls down as well, and we kind of opened up to each other, I was like, wow, these people are actually really cool and I really like them. And it wasn't so easy to say, oh no, I'm done. I'm not going to do this. When it came down to the end, I was like, no, like, I don't want to leave this. I don't want to leave them. I want to keep going. Um, so yeah, that's something to keep in mind. So if you're over here saying absolutely no, no way, you haven't actually met the people that you'd be doing this with. And it's a little bit harder to say no when you actually get to know them and if you actually mesh very well. And one other thing to know as well, though, is that Skyclad is not for everyone, and that is completely okay. You do not have to practice Skyclad if that is something that's absolutely out of your wheelhouse. Totally fine. I will say I came from a crazy Catholic background, and for me, part of that was like I think that while I was no longer Catholic, I had that Catholic guilt that comes along with being a former Catholic. And, I'm still working on that. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. When it came to the Skyclad issue, I'd like to say that I didn't have that Catholic guilt, but it was there a little bit. Um, but essentially, I'm happy I ended up going through with it and pushing that guilt away, being like, no, bye, taking my power.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, if it's not for everybody, and that's completely fine. Not every tradition is going to work for everybody. And I would say if anybody's listening to this and you're like, you know what, this is a cool topic, but I'm not going to do it, don't feel discouraged. Don't feel bad, because it's your own practice, it's your own journey, and you got to do what works for you and what you're most comfortable with. I will say that it's hard to grow unless you're a little uncomfortable now and then. Um, but you don't have to be skyclad if you don't want to.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. It really shouldn't, in my opinion, it shouldn't keep people from seeking. But everybody needs to make the decision that's best for themselves, their comfort level, and how they feel, about the practice. Again, I go back to, something that I said, I'm one who doesn't like to let fear control me. So I actively seek out things to challenge myself in that aspect. And this was, one of those things, being naked around people initially was a fear for me because of the body issues and things of that nature. But, you know, just learning how to push past that again is so incredibly helpful and freeing. And I would challenge people to just try it. Challenge yourself and just see. Lock your door, shut your blinds, pour yourself a glass of wine, turn on some music, take your clothes off and just dance. See how you feel in your own body, see how you feel in your skin. You're gonna feel really silly, the first time you do it. You might dance past a mirror and see yourself and go, oh gosh. And, those body issues come up for you. Push yourself past that, and just continue to do that and see how your body image starts to change. And that love and that respect for your body, how that starts to develop as you start to move and as you start to embrace who you are as an individual and as a whole. And as you start to let go of that Catholic guilt or that Southern Baptist, guilt and the what ifs around all of that pop up for us on occasion, it's amazing once you can challenge yourself to push past that.
Yeah, that's completely true. I completely agree with all of that. And, if you are interested in taking up Kim's suggestion, but you're maybe not completely ready to be completely naked or skyclad yet, just even in the privacy of your own bedroom, you could do something like just put on a bathrobe and just maybe just have like your underwear underneath it, or maybe have nothing underneath it. You can start slow. You don't have to jump into the deep end of the pool if you're not completely there yet. It's okay to take baby steps, and it's okay for those progressional steps to take as long as you need them to in between, if this is something that you're interested in and building up to. But yeah, so just to wrap it up, I think skyclad practice is a really cool, unique, and thing that can help get you out of that mundane, mindset and really just push you into something. And it's a really great way to have an intimate bond with the people in your coven. It's not sexual whatsoever. I just want to stress that it's really, really not. Um, Ultimately, I think Skyclad is a great thing. It could be a great tool for people. And if you're iffy about it, I'd say try it individually by yourself. And remember, as I mentioned, it's really hard to say no when you haven't met the people you have not done it with yet.
That is a very fair point. One of the other things, and I want to go back to the vouching piece where you said, seek the vouch for validity. Keep in mind, we are practicing skyclad. We are very raw. We are very vulnerable. And all of our traditions are not void of having people who may be proper initiates, but may not be proper people. So you
Mm-hmm.
want to not just make sure that um, you are validating that they are proper initiates, but ask good questions. You're going to be going over to somebody's home potentially and doing a lot of work there. And then if you do go through with initiation, you're going to be, at these people's home. Naked and ritual, and you just want to make sure that you know about the people that you're doing this work with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Kim makes a good point. So if you're looking at the Coven Leaders section, people there are properly vouched for being valid individuals, but you also want to make sure that you're going to mesh with them as well. And that kind of goes to a lot of times I'll see people talking about in like the seeker groups about how if there's a coven 5 minutes away from you and a coven 2 hours away from you, the coven that's right next door might not actually be the one that you really vibe with. And the one that's 2 hours away might actually be one that's you know, perfect match made in heaven. So it's very important to feel out the people that you're working with if you are interested in a specific tradition or type of coven or anything like that that does practice skyclad. This is a very intimate and raw thing, as Kim was saying, and it's important to make sure that the people that you'd be doing with are people that you feel completely comfortable with and people that will respect you and vice versa.
Yeah, completely agree. All very sound advice.
Yeah. All right. Well, Kim, thank you so much for coming on. Do you have any final closing thoughts you want to talk about in regards to Skyclad practice?
No, just the big thing is, we are not professional nudists. We all started somewhere.
Nope.
We all we all have body issues. We all have that self doubt that creeps in. None of us are void of that, and just know you're going to be surrounded by a lot of very supportive people who are there and present with you. Um, and again, as Ashley said, do what's comfortable for you. If it's not your thing, that's cool. But if it is something you're interested in trying out, just take your time, wade in the water, dip a toe in, don't have to jump full force into it. Just, you know, gauge your own comfort levels and work through that.
Definitely. Yeah. All right, Kim. So, one other question for you. So, I ask everybody who comes on the podcast one question. So, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
So, if you can give one piece of advice to a seeker about anything, doesn't have to be Skycloud, or it could if you wanted to. What would you give somebody? Somebody who's completely brand new, has maybe never even cast a circle or picked up a book yet. What would you tell them?
Um, my biggest thing is just to be true to who you are, and if something makes you uncomfortable, really sit with that and try to figure out where that discomfort is coming from. Talk with people about it. There are so many initiates who are willing to have open dialogue with you. The coven that you might be seeking with, they're there in support of you as well. Just talk, ask questions. We love to share advice and guidance. And at the end of the day, just be true to who you are and then find the path that speaks to you.
Extraordinarily sound advice. Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, thanks again so much for coming on. If anybody wanted to reach you, is there a way they can find you or get in contact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Kim Gardner on Facebook and Ravens Lenore, if you're a Edgar Allan Poe fan like I am, on Instagram.
Awesome. And As always, you can find me on my Twitter at Seek Witchcraft, Instagram at Seeking Witchcraft, Facebook group Seeking Witch, or my Facebook page is Seeking Witchcraft Podcast, or I have a Facebook group called Witches Seeking Witchcraft, or a Patreon, which is just called Seeking Witchcraft. Surprise! All right, yeah. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming on. Thank you again, Kim, for coming on and talking about this topic. I know it can be a little uncomfortable sometimes for people to discuss, and I'm so glad that I was able to have you on. To talk about your experiences and everything that you've provided today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on.
Hey, yeah, and it sounds like the dogs are, are happy too.
Yeah, they are.
All right, well, yeah. All right, well, thank you everyone for listening, and I'll talk to you all soon. Bye.